If it feels like the world is in turmoil at the moment, that's because it is. Fear and anger abound in our politics, in our social discourse, and in our expectations for the future. The finger of blame can be pointed at the usual suspects: dictators, populists, malcontents, and online trolls. But that's not the whole story. Social researchers warn that fear and anger have been monetized, the result of deliberate manipulation by commercial and political interests. Yet, experts warn that the antidote for our current malaise isn't simply to suppress our emotional extremes. In fact, both fear and anger can help positive social change by fostering a thirst for justice and even revolution. Instead, they say what's needed is a better public understanding of the role these emotions play in our lives, and a clearer appreciation that when emotions are manipulated, even good intentions can have disastrous consequences. When good fear goes bad. Historian and author Robert Peckham describes fear as the flip side of hope. Hope and fear, he says, are braided together. Fear sharpens the mind, which is why fear is used in campaigns, whether it's public health, whether it's to change people's attitude to things like climate change. He tells ABC it ends future tense. Professor Peckham argues that when societies fear losing their values and their way of life to an outside threat, that fear can steal their resolve, as happened in the fight against fascism in the mid-20th century. However, he cites the long paranoia of the Cold War as an example when the well-intentioned deployment of fear went terribly wrong. When aspirational elements in politics become overtaken by fear, then it poses a challenge, he says. After the Second World War and the horrors that the world experienced, democratic countries became defensive. In other words, they saw fear as an important tool for making sure that these kinds of perversions never happened again. But in the process of doing that, fear actually became too important as a component. And rather than being a sort of defensive mechanism, it started to eclipse the very values that it was supposed to be protecting. This helps explain why democratic countries have engaged in many dubious moral campaigns over the many decades since World War II, like the US. LED invasion of Iraq in 2003, and the propping up of brutal, right-wing dictatorships across the globe. Overusing fear tactics. Professor Peckham talks of societies and communities becoming enculturated in fear. But he says the overuse of fear's motivational capacity can lead to disinterest and distrust. I think we saw that perhaps during COVID that too much fear creates apathy. People shrug their shoulders and say, "Why bother?" He says. Noel Castry believes the issue is partly a problem of language. Professor Castry studies the political economy of environmental change. He says the growing fear-based discourse around climate change, for example, and the use of fear-laden expressions and words often